as much as the military love to joke, like they're the funniest and they have the unique jokes. I mean, until you've been with merchant mariners, it's really a whole different. It's a
Oh, it's
step
a
up.
whole other animal.
It is a step up.
Welcome, everyone, to the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a small nonprofit based in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. Part of this podcast is that we want to educate you. We want to bridge the military-civilian divide, and we do that by bringing on veterans, civilians, to talk about military issues. We ended last season by going through each individual branch of the military, and someone reached out to us and said, hey, you haven't done the Merchant Marines. And we said, you're right. So we took the time, researched some online, and we found some Merchant Marines to come on and talk to us about what the Merchant Marines are and the whole history of it, the Jones Act. We're going to get into all of that in just a few minutes, but I want to go ahead and allow our guests today to introduce themselves. Sal, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, my name is Sal Mercogliano. I'm an associate professor of history over at Campbell University in North Carolina. I started off my career as a merchant mariner. I went to the State University of New York Maritime College, which is one of the 6 maritime universities and colleges out in the United States. I got a BS in marine transportation. I worked for an entity called the Military Sea Lift Command, which is a Navy organization that employs merchant mariners in the crewing of their vessels. Sailed for them for 3 years during the Persian Gulf War. Did that for 3 years, and then I came down with a condition that precluded me from continuing my sailing career. I got married, and that kind of really just is really the downfall for many merchant mariners, as I can attest to. Shifted ashore, worked for 4 years for the same entity, Military Sea Lift Command in DC. Worked for down the Navy Yard and the Pentagon. Did that, and then I hit the 7-year mark, and I had to decide what to do. And I decided to embark on an academic career. I was really interested in the history of the Merchant Marine, and I didn't think there was a lot written out there about it. So I left the military, left the government, went down to East Carolina University, got a master's in maritime history and nautical archaeology, wrote my master's thesis on the role of the Merchant Marine in the Vietnam War. And then I went to the University of Alabama, did a PhD in military naval history, and my doctoral dissertation was on the role of the Merchant Marine in national defense in American history. And since then, I'm also an adjunct professor with the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. I teach a course since 2008 in marine industry policy. So I get an opportunity to write not just about maritime history, but I also talk about current policy. And I'm a contributor for G-Captain, which is a big entity that writes about the current maritime industry.
Wow. So yes, expert, definitely. We're going to dive into some of that
I
knowledge.
don't know about that, but a lot of background.
Yeah, that's great. And Bridget, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Captain Bridget Cooney. I'm currently sailing as Chief Officer for Liberty Maritime Corporation in their car ship fleet, hoping to bump up to Master soon. I also went to the State University of New York Maritime College. I graduated in 2015 with a Bachelor's of Science in Marine Transportation and have been sailing nonstop with Liberty on their car ships ever since. It's been an amazing ride. They're a phenomenal company to work for, and I've loved every minute of it.
So you're currently on ship right now
for their opportunity.
Yeah.
No, I'm home. I'm
okay.
Home up in Westchester, New York.
Does it feel weird like being on land?
Oh, it feels so weird. My last contract was 7 months. I've been off about a month and a half now, and it's still kind of the come down effect, just adjusting back into general population in the real world.
I'll bet. Well, normally with the Scuttlebutt, we go through several different segments. I think we're going to forego those segments for this episode because of our illustrious guests today. So we're going to dive straight into the Merchant Marine and understand what that is, how it started, why anybody would choose to work as a Merchant Marine. We're going to go right ahead. And that goes into my first question, which actually is pretty basic. What are the Merchant Marines? When I first heard about it, I saw the word Marines. I thought military, but that doesn't always mean that's true. Is that correct?
I think one of the things that gets confusing is that term marine in it, and merchant mariners, we refer to ourselves as mariners, not marines. So
Mariners, thank you.
to avoid that confusion. So
Mhm.
the merchant marine isn't really a set organization. It's not like, there's not a department of the merchant marine, like there's a department of Army and Navy. But it actually predates the founding of the United States. I mean, the merchant marine flag has, in peace and war, and it has 1775 on it.
Mhm.
And one of the things it's a kind of conglomeration of companies, organizations, schools, unions. It basically is the commercial shipping for the United States. So it's not structured as a military entity, yet it's on the front line in times of war. And that's where it's kind of mistaken. Merchant marine is kind of like what Bridget does. Bridget sails the world. I mean, she literally is on circumnavigations of the planet on ships flying the US flag. But merchant mariners are also operating ferries across rivers. They're operating ships on the Great Lakes. They're operating ships along our coastwise, tugs and barges. The Staten Island ferry is part of the merchant marine. All these elements make it up. And in many ways, our history was derived. I mean, we're a maritime nation. If you look at the first 13 colonies, they all faced the sea. And that was a big entity for us. As we eventually became a continental nation, we kind of turned inward and not so much outward. But today, 90% of all goods on the high sea, all goods move by the high seas. And that's a big entity. One of the things that we're seeing right now is the impact of COVID-19 on our ability to bring goods in and out of the United States. And all that depends on the merchant marine. And like I said, in time of war, the merchant marines are unique in that they're the only really civilian organization that's on the front lines in times of war. And we've seen that in the world wars. We've seen that as recently as the Persian Gulf War. We saw it with, Captain Phillips being grabbed by pirates off the coast of Somalia. And so, it's a very unique kind of entity and organization. And Bridget can talk a little bit more about what the current merchant marine is and what the U.S. Flag does today.
So my ship, we carry everything from cars. We have a contract with Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ford. We're also subsidized by the military. So we carry military vehicles and equipment and containers. There's about 60 ships, one of which being mine, that fall under what's called the Maritime Security Program, where the companies receive a $5 million a year subsidy for their ships to carry the military's cargo. So that's really the bread and butter of what my company, Liberty Maritime, what our ships carry. We usually will take the cargo from the States, bring it to the Middle East, and then bring military cargo back to the US.
It's fascinating. So if I'm getting this correct, then during times of war, which, I mean, I guess we've been in 20 years of war, would the merchant mariners be shipping war supplies and troops or anything, or what are the type of goods that we ship through that service?
In my ship, for example, we carry trucks, Humvees, containers of equipment, containers of their personal belongings.
What Bridget's talking about there is that maritime security program, which has those 60 ships and it's not just 60 ships, it's the companies too. Okay. They have, set services around the world. And so if you're in a forward operating base in Afghanistan, for example, you're being supplied by ship. Yeah, it may be a helicopter or a truck bringing your goods directly to you in that forward operating base, but it's a ship from the Maritime Security Program, one of those 60 ships that's dropping off cargo in Karachi, Pakistan, or Riga, Latvia, or even Vladivostok, Russia, and then it's being hauled overland to there. And so it's part of that network. And that's one of the reasons why the United States maintains a domestic merchant marine. A lot of nations have given up on their domestic merchant marines. One of the things that's happened since the end of World War II is the proliferation of what they call open registries. These nations that allow, basically you can register your ship in them for a very low cost. So countries like Panama, Liberia, the Marshall Islands, they're the dominant flags on ships today. But the U.S. maintains a domestic merchant marine, a national merchant marine for largely this military purpose. And because we need to be able to sustain our military, and we don't want to be dependent entirely on foreign ships for their cargo, for fear that it would basically put us in a bad position. Something we're finding out right now, by the way, with COVID on the West Coast.
Yeah. So you are government employees, or do you work for like a independent organization or a corporation?
I work for a union.
Okay.
I'm a member of the Marine Engineers Beneficial Association,
Mhm.
also known as the MEBA. And then through the MEBA, I'm a company employee of Liberty Maritime Corporation.
Mhm.
They
Now,
operate a fleet of 7 U.S. flag ships. They have 4 car ships, 3 grain ships, and then some foreign flag card ships that they have space chartering on.
Bridget, I'm going to take a step back real quick and ask why you decided to become a merchant mariner.
Well, I grew up on the water sailing. I knew as a kid growing up, I always wanted a hands-on job. And when I was in high school, I discovered New York Maritime, and I just figured it would be a really great fit.
Did you enjoy the academy? What surprised you about it?
I love the hands-on training. I mean, the actual ship-related classes were a blast. It was like being at summer camp, like ship-themed summer camp. It was fun. But it surprised me how rigorous it was, because you not only did you have your ship classes, you were also getting a business degree, more or less, in marine transportation.
Mhm.
So you're taking up to one semester, I had up to 30 hours of class a week. So it was just the intensity of it was probably the most surprising. I thought it was just going to be 4 years of ship summer camp.
Oh,
It's it's what's different about it, Sean, is, and
yeah.
it's funny, as I was going to the Navy Academy, I was slated to go to the Navy Academy. I was all
Right.
set. I grew up on the South Shore of Long Island. My dad had a 30-foot Sea Ray boat. We used to go out fishing all the time, and I was the driver. I was always the driver, because my dad and his friends used to enjoy shark fishing to the point of getting a little too much enjoyment in some of the libations with it. So I'd always bring the boat back in, but we would go
You're the
offshore.
DD.
I was the designated driver. So we'd be offshore, and you'd see the ships coming in and out of New York Harbor all the time. So these big, huge, massive ships coming in. And all I ever thought about was driving the ship.
Mhm.
Got in the Navy Academy, all set to go to the Navy Academy. And then I had my physical, and they said, well, your eyes are bad. I had glasses at the time. And they said, your eyes are bad. You can never drive ships for the military. You can do some other job, but you couldn't, at the time, you weren't allowed to do that.
Mhm.
And so I had to shift real quick. I went to SUNY Maritime, because that's all I wanted to do was drive ships
Yeah.
for a living. And one of the things that is different between the Merchant Marine and the Navy, for example, is in the Navy, the pinnacle of your career may be to command a vessel. And ship captains are rare in the Navy. You may get 1 ship, 2 ships.
Mhm.
It's a pretty rare entity. But Navy guys transfer between ship and shore. They're always floating back and forth. They're doing 2 years here, 2 years there, back and forth.
Right.
Merchant mariners are on ships all the time. That's what we do and everything.
Mhm.
The last captain I sailed with had the ship we were on. It was his 24th command he'd had. And so he had commanded 24 different vessels.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's a much kind of mantra, kind of what Bridget talked about with the hands-on was great, because all you want to do is be on the ships. That's what you want to do. And that's the kind of job and career you want to have. You really don't want to be on shore. That's not where the money is. That's not where the excitement is.
Uh-huh.
You want to be on the ships. And so that's a real big difference between it. And the ship handling experience, like Bridget, she's been, sailing since 2015, but she's probably got more ship handling experience than, a Navy captain who's in his 25th year. And that's the big difference, I think, that you
Mhm.
see too, is the desire to really want to be on board vessels and operate them.
Now, you guys mentioned Captain Phillips, obviously made really famous, not only by the headlines, but by Tom Hanks in the movie. Is there danger involved in this on a normal basis, or is it just like where you're at in the world? Is that sort of what you have to deal with in certain waters?
Yeah, we transit the same waters that Captain Phillips got hijacked in,
Mhm.
and taken hostage in fairly regularly. Our ship, we still carry a riding crew of armed guards, but fortunately, we're a very tall ship. We have over 100 feet of height or freeboard, and it's not, and we go fast. I don't think a ship that goes over 17 knots has ever been taken hostage, so it's not as much of a risk for us
Mhm.
as it is for a smaller, lower, slower ship. But it's still a risk. And I mean, to lower our insurance premiums when transiting that area, it's still worth carrying the armed guards.
Right.
And one of the big differences too is Captain Phillips getting seized. If you watch the movie, or you look at the history of that event, the Navy reacted to that. They went and saved Tom. You have to save Tom Hanks, so they went and saved Tom Hanks. They had to, but at the same time, there were hundreds of mariners being held prisoner off the coast of Somalia at the time. But the problem were they weren't Americans. They weren't on American flag vessels. That was the big difference. Same thing when the sailing yacht Quest was grabbed. You had a big reaction for that because that was an American flag vessel. And that's one of the big differences. I would highlight something that Bridget didn't mention, but I think it's an industrial job. So there's always a risk involved with it. I mean, you're at sea. We lost a vessel a few years ago. The SS El Faro was lost with all hands in a hurricane off the Bahamas. There's moving cargo. Bridget can tell you when you're moving cargo on a vessel is one of the most dangerous times on board a vessel. Loading hybrid cars today is one of the most dangerous things in the world because of vehicle fires. One of the things with car carriers like Bridget's on, describe Bridget's ship. It's a parking deck. It's a parking deck that floats. And imagine a parking deck just jam to jam with vehicles. And, today, vehicle fires are dangerous. We see that in a lot of car carriers today. Stability wise, if you look at just off the coast of Brunswick, Georgia right now, there's a car carrier that's being cut up because it capsized. It was a foreign flag, the Golden Ray. She flipped over in Brunswick. And so, I mean, there's an inherent danger in the profession to begin with. And you add to it pirates and other things.
That's incredible. It's, and a lot of like enlistees for the military are going to go in with that expectation that they're going to face danger. Is that something that they teach you at the academy when you go in? They're like, this is serious business. It's not just, you're going to get out on the high seas and sail around.
Yeah, they instill that in you. They instill into you not to get complacent, that, you have a tremendous financial responsibility. The responsibility of everyone's lives are in your hands when you're navigating the vessel, and that every decision you make needs to be taken seriously and with great care. That way, no one gets injured and there's not a big catastrophe or financial loss to the company.
Right. These are, these are massive, massive ships. What number of crew are we looking at, sailing from port to port on a given, what would you call that? One from port to port, that would be called a transit.
Voyage?
Thank you. So on a transit or voyage, on a regular transit or voyage, how many crew members are on the ship?
Well, usually our baseline is 19, and then
19.
When we get to the Middle East, we get the riding crew. So that adds 3 people. So that's 19 plus 3, 20, 21, that's 22. And then usually between 1 and 3 cadets. So you could have anywhere between 19 and the most 25.
And Bridget's ship, Bridget, how long is your ship? How big's the last one you were on? About 700-800 feet?
656 feet.
600, yeah. I mean, you look at ships out there, if you go foreign flag, I mean, there's 1,300 foot vessels out there carrying 23,000 boxes, and they have
I can't even imagine that.
I know, and they have crews like 15. It's just it's even less.
That blows my mind. In watching the videos that I've checked out while researching this episode, these ships are, I say massive, but these are massive ships. So how do you take care of a ship with 20 to 25 people that size?
Yeah, you delegate your resources very carefully.
Yeah.
For example, right now I'm sailing as chief officer. I have to wear about 10 different hats. Navigation officer, safety officer, medical officer, chief cargo officer. And you just delegate. You have to prioritize your maintenance, prioritize your people to make sure everything gets done according to plan.
I'm never going to complain about working for a nonprofit again, where we say, "Oh, what hat am I wearing today?" So take me through sort of a normal day. Like, sun comes up. What's going on the ship throughout the course of a day to sort of make sure that you guys are on track to make it to where you need to go?
Well, Bridget will tell you one thing. First of all, day doesn't start when the sun comes up. It starts at midnight and it ends at midnight, and it never ends. But go ahead, Bridget.
Definitely taking away all my rights to complaining about anything ever.
Yeah. So just for example, my day typically starts as chief mate. A day at sea, I'll wake up at 4 a.m, navigate the ship till 8 a.m. And during that time, I'm also kind of contemplating what maintenance I'm going to have my day workers do during the day, whether it's chipping and painting to maintain the vessel and reduce rust, or getting the car decks ready for a load or discharge, checking cargo lashings. So at 8 o'clock, I'll get off watch, assign the guys their jobs for the day, assign the officers their tasks for the day, whether it be safety inspections, equipment maintenance, anything to do with cargo that might be coming up. And then I'll do my stuff for the day. And that's usually taking soundings of the tanks, checking the cargo, making sure the guys are keeping up with what they're supposed to be doing. I usually do any ballasting that needs to be done before port. And then at noon, I'll have lunch and then be off until 4 in the afternoon, and then go back and navigate the ship till 8 at night, and then go over with the guys the progress they made that day.
Yeah, one of the things I'd add, what Bridget's not saying, and she's being very modest about this, is mates and engineers, they operate 4 hours on, 8 hours off. So if you had the noon to 4 watch, you got the midnight to 4 watch. So you're always, there's only an 8-hour gap between it, but that 8 hours is usually filled with a lot of work in between. And it's 7 days a week. It's Groundhog Day. Every day is the same. You're basically, you repeat. There's never a day off. There's never, until you sign off the ship. Bridget's been on for 7 months. She's been on for 7 months. She has not had a day off in 7 months. So, she's working at the minimum 8 hours a day. And as chief mate, which is, next to, the chief engineer and the first assistant engineer, probably the hardest working jobs on the ship, is making sure that everything is ready going in. And so it's a lot of prep work, and you have to do as much as you can. When you're on the bridge, it's you and an unlicensed person. Usually that's it. That's, that's the 2 of you up there,
Right.
Same thing down the engine space. There's the 2 of you down there during that time. And then, like I said, you're running the entire time. So, you're always busy. It's never quiet, and you're never getting 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah,
So-
there's never a dull moment. Especially as chief mate, the second I leave my room, it's, hey mate, can you get this for me? Can you do this for me? I
to
get
be
in there and
available.
lock my door and barricade it with a chair so no one bothers me.
So to me, that sounds like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 7 months would be a bit overwhelming. To me, that seems like a negative, but maybe it's not. But I was going to ask, what are the positives to that? Where are the positives? Is it hitting port and being able to check out different, exotic locations? Or is
The
it
money.
just the money? The Benjamins, it's all about it.
But it's, I don't typically get off in port. When we get to port, I'm going full steam ahead the entire time we're there. It's very rare that I'll get to sleep in port or be off my feet for any considerable amount of time. I'm ballasting, doing cargo, making sure that unless I have very, very good junior officers, I'm usually always on deck in port to make sure the cargo is being lashed correctly, because it's too important of a task to let it go. And it's my responsibility to make sure everything's okay. It's too important to delegate.
Which is huge.
It's one of those things, Sean, where you don't make money in port, you spend money in port. And so the ships don't want to be in port. The minute you drop the ramp, the minute the cranes come over to start moving the cargo, you want to be, lines on, lines off as quick as you can. And that's all part of the business, and that's the big difference between merchant, the merchant marine and something like the Navy, for example, where it's productivity. You have to be productive. You have to be able to move this cargo. You need to be able to do it. And if you're sitting there tied up at the dock and you're wasting time, that's, you're paying dock fees, you're paying everything. And more importantly, you're not heading off to the next port to be able to move. And it's, most ships spend on average, and this is worldwide, less than a day in port. So by the time you're in, throw the lines, you're up and going, and, there's another ship waiting right behind you to come in, and you got to get your dock space at the next port, or else you're going to be charged fees for not using it. And so you kind of need to continually going. The other plus I would say with Bridget too is the time off. Once you're off, you're off. It's nice. It is nice. One of the things I used to love is be able to go on for 6 months and then you have a month or two off and you do it. It's harder and harder for people like Bridget now because there's more requirements on them when they're off to keep their training up. And that's a big difference too, is it's really on the merchant mariners to maintain their license, maintain their credentials. And that becomes a tougher and tougher thing to do in the what little free time you have back at home.
Wow. I want to go from the micro here, from the personal experience, back up to sort of a macro view here, and ask about the Merchant Marine Act and the Jones Act. Are they the same thing? What I've heard a lot of things in the news as I was starting to research about the Jones Act. So there's sort of two sides to what the argument is on that. And I thought, Sal, you could sort of lead us through what the Jones Act is and why there's sort of warring sides on what its effectiveness is.
Sure. So, I mean, just a real quick history is, back in prior to 20th century, nations had their merchant marine. The British were the largest merchant marine in the world. They dominated the globe. Half the world ships flew the British flag. The United States challenged the British to that in the 19th century. We really made a big effort to challenge them to it. That's where we really wanted to make our mark. And we did it pretty well. But then all of a sudden, Civil War happens, and there's a lot of incidences that go in there. There are Confederate raiders, a whole batch of things, and the American merchant marine declines. And one of the things that happens is in World War I, we don't get involved in World War I initially. 1914, World War I happens. We stay out of it. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that impacted us was most of our foreign cargo, not our coastal cargo, but our foreign cargo. You remember 1914, there's no interstate highway system. There's no interstate pipeline system. Mm-hmm. So most cargo moves coastwise via ship. Most of our foreign cargo, our imports and exports, moved on foreign flagships. When World War I happened, they went away. The German merchant marine disappeared. The British merchant marine went to go support the British military. And all of a sudden, our goods piled up on the docks and we couldn't export or import anything. Very similar to what's happening today, by the way.
Wow.
And so one of the things that happened at the end of World War I was a realization that we need a kind of maritime strategy, a policy. What's our maritime policy going to be? And that policy was something called the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, the Jones Act, named for Wesley Jones, a senator from Washington. And what it was a very coherent strategy that, hey, we're going to have a foreign commerce merchant marine. We're going to have a domestic merchant marine. What it means today, because parts of the Jones Act have been whittled away over time, the one element that remains today is Section 27, which is the domestic, what's called cabotage section. Okay. So if you want to move goods between the United States, between ports in the United States, you want to pick up a load of cargo in Baltimore and dump it off in Jacksonville, Florida, you have to be under the Jones Act, U.S. built, U.S. owned, U.S. flagged, and U.S. crewed. That's the requirement. So you can, a foreign ship can come into a U.S. port. Foreign ship can come into Baltimore, drop cargo off. It can then go to Savannah or Jacksonville and drop cargo off, but it can't pick up cargo and move it between the ports.
Okay.
And what the fleet that Bridget sails with is that international fleet, those 60 ships that are in the international trade. There's about 100 ships, large ships, over 1,000 gross tons, that are in the coastal trade. These are ships that go between Hawaii, Matson and Pasha, for example, ships that go to Puerto Rico, ships that move oil along the coast for overseas shipping group. And so that's that entity, that's the Jones Act. And where the Jones Act gets a lot of attention is a lot of people don't like it because they want to open up U.S. ports to foreign ships. They want to basically, end the U.S. build requirement, end the U.S. flag requirement, and basically have other ships be able to do it. The issue with that is fine. If you're any other nation but the U.S., that's fine. As an American, do I care if an American ship delivers my socks, to Walmart, and like I say, most Americans don't. They just don't care. As long as it's cheap, that's all I care about. But the problem goes back to that military element. It goes back to the guys in the Marines, the women in the Air Force, everyone overseas. What happens when you have to get the supplies to them? And that's where the Jones Act and the Ships of the Maritime Security Program come in. Mm-hmm. Merchant mariners are used to crew a reserve fleet of ships. There's about 61 ships that the Navy and the Maritime Administration maintain. These are ships that can be called upon in a 5-day notice, loaded with goods, supplemented by ships like Bridget operates, and they can haul the cargo we need overseas. The problem is you need mariners to crew those ships. Mm-hmm. And where those mariners get their employment, their experience, their jobs, and the pool of them come from the Jones Act fleet. Okay. And that's what you see happening right now. This is the argument, by the way, that's going on with the Alaskan cruise trade right now, with the fact that Canada shut down its ports to cruises, and now all of a sudden these Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian can't go to Alaska because they can't stop in Vancouver. This is part of that, although it's technically the Passenger Vessel Service Act, very similar to the Jones Act.
Interesting. So what would be the point of waiving the Jones Act then? Would that just be to make sure that things can be shipped easier?
Well, it deals with the nature of the maritime industry. So you asked to be, one of the first questions you asked is, what is the merchant marine? And this is where you get into the issue of what is the merchant marine, because the merchant marine is shipbuilders. It's not just people who operate ships. It's not just Liberty that Bridget works for. It's not the union members of MEBA or MMP or these other unions that are out there. It's not the maritime schools. It's also the shipyards. And there's a lot of entities that are in there. And so when you waive the Jones Act, which has happened at times, in times of
President can do this.
Right. The president could do it. Like if there's a hurricane hits an island, Puerto Rico, and you need to get supplies in, you can waive it temporarily to do that. And again, commercially speaking, economically speaking, the U.S. doesn't suffer from that. I would argue we do in a very important way, that we become too dependent on foreign shipping then. And then we're kind of at the mercy of the foreign shipping to really control it. And so one of the things we want to do is keep a domestic merchant marine, because again, one of the things we've seen in not just the world wars, but in conflicts like Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan, is we need ships like Bridget's she sails on, and crews like Bridget, to be able to get that cargo over there. The Department of Defense counts on that.
Thank you for that. Now I want to step back to Bridget here, because I had a thought, and a lot of news coming out of the military now is a lot about integrating women into training, into the Marines. Bridget, how is it working as a merchant mariner as a female? And did you, are you a smaller portion of the total merchant Marines, like female representation?
Yeah, we are. I think the number is 2 or 3% of the merchant marine is comprised of females. So it's a very small percentage, but I've been very fortunate. I've always been treated very well by my shipmates, by Liberty. It's been, I couldn't have asked for a more positive work environment to be in.
And being a captain, what rank is that? And I'm not, excuse my ignorance, what rank is captain as you ascend through the ranks of ship?
Captain, it would be equivalent to a Navy captain.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and chief officer would be like an XO on a Navy ship.
Okay, great. And so what has been your experience overall? Like you going through the academy, did you feel you were really like promoted to seek out as much as you could? Like, there was no blockades or barriers to your integration through the Merchant Marines?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, I've always felt it's been really, really equal treatment. Never felt ostracized as a woman. It's been, I mean, I know other women haven't had the same experience, but I've just been incredibly fortunate to have had a company that supports me as a woman, being supported as a woman at the academy. And I couldn't ask for anything better. Like with a crew and everything as well. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think I go a long way to try and earn the crew's respect. I know as a woman, I'm not going to be as strong or as fast as a man would be. So I try and excel in other areas, especially as a junior mate, when I was really trying to come up and prove myself. I would be excelling in and anything that didn't require brute strength, just to show my value. And I think that went a long way.
Sal, back when you were in the Merchant Marines, did you notice there were a lot of women in the Merchant Marine at that time? Do you think that's evolved over the course of time?
It's funny. I graduated in 1989 from SUNY Maritime, and our class had the first regimental female commander, Linda Millay, and she was actually the first regimental commander or commander of cadets, brigade command, whatever you want to call her, for any institution. When we beat the Navy Academy, we beat all the institutions for having that. And to tell you the truth, that was kind of, it was not unusual. So I mean, I got raised right from the very beginning with the idea. I mean, there was a small percentage. There was not a lot when I was at SUNY Maritime, maybe about 10%. So it wasn't a lot, but it's a unique entity. You talked about the rank structure, for example. Like I said, it's a small group. I mean, when you're 20, 25 people on a ship, it's not hierarchical. We don't salute. It's not the way it works. It's a lot, not just the title, but you have to really earn what it is, and it's a small little group. I mean, everybody, there's no hiding, it's just, you can't really, sit back and not work, because all of a sudden you get identified with that. And so everybody, always tries to do their best. I sailed with female mates. I never had a master who was a female at the time, but it was common. I mean, it really wasn't unusual about that. And I think that's one of the things that makes it. The Merchant Marine has always been very diverse. I mean, this is an institution where in World War II, African Americans were commanding vessels. There was not racial segregation. It's too small. I mean, you can't have it in this area. And so it's not unusual for this to be the next step to happen. Now there's issues. There's always issues. There's always harassment. And I got to say, working with merchant mariners is a unique thing, because they will bust on you like no other group. And you got to be ready to go back with them.
Yeah.
On that, I will say one of the toughest transitions I have. I teach at a very Baptist university. Is resisting my effort to use my maritime language at times, and even though I haven't sailed in a long time, it still lingers with you.
It's still like swearing like a sailor, right? Like,
oh yeah, that whole like maritime sense of humor is so warped. It's like I'll come home and be with like my non-maritime friends, and we'll just be like, whoa. I'm like, all right, I guess I gotta go.
You cut me to the quick, Bridget. That's like 3 in a row. Come on.
as much as the military love to joke, like they're the funniest and they have the unique jokes. I mean, until you've been with merchant mariners, it's really a whole different. It's a step up. It is a step up, because again, we're also the stepchild of a lot of institutions. So. When you, like you said, when you introduce yourself as a merchant marine, people are like, oh, that's Marines. And you always have to, I've never not had to explain what that is. The usual thing is you introduce yourself as one. It's like, oh, I had an uncle or a grandfather or someone was like that. And then they'll take a minute and say, what exactly is that? And then you have to explain it all the time. And so it's always a unique introduction. But mariners are just notoriously for ripping on each other.
You need a pamphlet you could just pull out, like just have a pack of them and just, this is what it is. Like, just read that and come back and we'll talk. This leads me to a sort of a 2-part question. Dealing with other merchant marines, like, obviously it takes, I think, a very particular personality to want to be out on the open seas for 7 months, traveling to different ports, working on these enormous ships. What has been your experiences working with your crews and the people that you worked with? Like, how is that? How much fun is it? And can you think of a particular story that you'd like to tell that might be family friendly for our audience of an experience you've had on one of the ships?
So I remember going on my first ship, and I sailed for Military Sea Lift Command. It was a little bit different than the way Bridget sailed. I had a little bigger crew, because the ships I sailed on are owned by the Navy, but they use merchant mariner crews on board. And so the vessel I was on was a tanker, but we didn't haul oil from point A to point B. We actually refueled ships at sea, so we need more crew on board. So we had a crew of about 100 on board, a little bit more, a little heavier than what Bridget would have, but less than what a Navy ship has. And it's not usually, it's not common knowledge, but 1 out of 6 ships in the U.S. Navy have these civilian crews on board. And so I had actually 3 crew members who worked for me, 2 ABs and an ordinary seaman. Ordinary seaman is kind of like the lowest rung, and the AB is a little bit higher. But I had this one AB, and I'll never forget him. His name was Cates. I can't remember his first name. You never call anybody by the first name anyway. It's always, just him. And man, this is the most redneck person I had ever met in my life. I don't mean that derogatory. I live in North Carolina. I mean, this guy is picture perfect, from the South. I mean, missing teeth. I mean, just spit cup and everything like that. And he would just bust on college boy. That was me. I was college boy. I was the brand new third mate. And he made every day on watch just a living hell at times. And he pushed me all the time.
Yeah.
But I got to say and again, you would think my big goal was to impress the captain, was to impress the chief mate and everything. But the day I got a bit of respect from Cates was the best day I had, when I did something and he gave me like, that was a good job, and that was like, man, that's it. That, I got his respect.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge, that's a challenge of leadership that you had to learn is you're not always trying to impress the top. You're also trying to impress the guys below you. And I think that's something that has stayed with me for a long time afterwards. You can have all the rank in the world and people are going to, give you that, but you got to earn it at times. And in many ways, the merchant marine is a meritocracy. You don't get promoted. You don't. You have to sail for a set period of time and then go take a license upgrade. So you got to be tested. So
Yeah.
you graduate with a third mate's license or a third engineer's license, got to sail for 365. Well, you used to have to sail for 365 days and take a test, and then you would take your test, and now you're a second mate. But it doesn't mean you're going to sail a second mate. You may sail way below your license, depending on what the job is. But it's very much a meritocracy. You have to earn it and then promote up. But stories like that are the things that always stay with me.
Yeah. Bridget, did you have a moment to think? Who's your most memorable crew member?
Oh God. I mean, I can't think of any that are like PG rated.
Can we do PG-13? Is that one step up?
But I mean, I'll just elaborate on what Sean said. Not Sean, what Sal said. Yeah, I mean, it's very much about, especially I'm 28, sailing in a chief mate, soon to be master role. A lot of it, my biggest challenge is I'm leading people as a 28-year-old that are of my parents' generation. So that's a whole other layer of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I find the most important thing is connecting with them, showing them that I'm not just some punk kid with a master's license, that I actually care about them, and earning their respect and, their trust, and me displaying that I care about them is the most important thing to me.
Mm.
Everything else comes second. It's knowing that the guys know that I care about them and can lead them, and earning their respect is the most important. And then once that falls into place, then everything works out fine. I mean,
yeah.
And I go out of my way to do it because I have to, because I'm so young. I mean, I'm always talking with the guys about their kids, their families, trying to connect with them, try to do social stuff. Like we'll do movies, or we have some guys that are into video games. We'll all play video games together. And I
got some good Mario Kart going on the
show. Good Madden. Just connecting with them like that goes. I mean, especially I have high expectations. I ask a ton out of my guys. Mm-hmm. So connecting with them in that manner, I always carry their bags on board for them, even for the ordinary seamen, just as a sign of respect. It's, it's my way of saying, I know I'm going to ask a lot about you. I mean, a lot of you, but I value you as a person and what you mean to this ship.
That's awesome. And, I didn't think that it would be so much the same as the military, in the sense of like brotherhood and sisterhood. Like, the people that you're with for those 7 months, that's your family for that time. And you gotta, you gotta respect them, and you gotta trust them because, you all are in it together.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I can't tell you how many guys, tell me towards the end of a trip, like, oh, when I first saw you, I just thought, oh, hell no. Here's this punk kid and she's going to be my boss. What the hell? And then, telling me that they actually really enjoyed working with me.
That's a good feather in your cap. Definitely.
And that's a big thing too, is because, we deal in the merchant marine with a lot of turnover. I mean, so, people are on ships a long time, it's not like 2 years on a ship with the Navy or something like that, or 3 years. It's, it's quick, it's a voyage, sometimes it's just a few months, and you're always cycling, always churning. And so, you got to build those relationships, and those relations get passed on to the next crew coming on board. And so, and it's always that thing. It's so easy to damage it if you do the one wrong thing, because they will remember the one wrong thing if you do it. And every little thing you ever do, I remember we used to have to call the crews out for underway replenishments. And one time the ship was going to be, the other ship was going to be late for the rendezvous. And I didn't have the call out for 30 minutes. I let the guy sleep for an extra 30 minutes. And I got my butt chewed to me by the master. He got mad at me for doing that. I didn't call him. I just did it. But there was no reason to do it. But that chewing out was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because the crew just loved it, that they got an extra 30 minutes of sleep. And it cost me with the captain, but it earns a lot of respect with the crew.
Is there a favorite port or part of the world that you've sailed through that you're like, oh, I could go back there and live there? Because I would assume that going into the merchant marine, like, part of it is that world exploration, that sense of adventure that you're going to get, sailing around the world.
I loved England, Ireland, Gibraltar was great. Australia was amazing. I could see myself living those places. The Far East was also very nice. Japan, South Korea.
I want to highlight the institution that Bridget and I went to school at, which is a unique, our college undergraduate is unique versus everybody else's because, we go to school for 4 years. We're in South Bronx. We're the trolls underneath the Throgs Neck Bridge. But for 2 months out of the summer, we go on a training ship. We go on our school training ship and take off. And it's the best summer gig in the world. It really was. It was so good.
That was like summer camp.
I was, and we would go back in the, we'd go to Europe, we'd go to the Mediterranean. I went to, Sweden and that was a huge appeal for me. I could throw a bag in anywhere and go. And to me, that was the best thing. When I sailed with Military Sea Lift Command, I went to some of the best places because we did things a little differently. We weren't on a set schedule. Some ships like Bridget's operate on a set schedule. It's like, okay, you're going to be in these ports these days and off you go again and do it again and again and again. We would go everywhere. But I have to agree, I think my favorite port of all time was Edinburgh, Scotland. I just love Scotland. I think it's absolutely amazing. I love that. I love Dubai when I was in Dubai and everything like that.
Dubai is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love Dubai. Singapore is a great spot and everything like that. I don't recommend Mogadishu. I don't recommend Somalia. It's a terrible spot. Don't go there.
I don't recommend Djibouti or Qasir. No, or,
that's the flip side, Sean. People always ask what's the best ports, and no one asks oh, don't go here again.
Yeah, but I had that written down. Where are the places you don't want to go back to?
And most of the places on my ship calls.
And it gives us a very unique perspective, I would argue. We're pretty, Bridget 25, has been around the world a couple of times, and it's pretty seasoned. I did a cadet tour to Antarctica, so you go to places that you don't typically go to. By the time I was 25, I'd been on 6 continents, so it covered a good spectrum of the world, and it really makes me a unique history professor now because I've been to a lot of places I talk about.
Right.
But it gives you a very unique perspective of what it's like. I think Bridget would share the same thing is there's nothing like coming back to the United States. There is
there isn't. I mean, I remember, I guess I was, 22 when I ended my first commercial around the world voyage and just not realizing how sheltered I was because that was the first time I'd been exposed to a lot of these third world countries, the abject poverty of some of these places. I just wanted to kiss the ground when I got back to the States. I really did.
Wow. Oh, yeah. This is a good advertisement for anybody listening that might be thinking about a career in the Merchant Marines. I mean, I have definitely a sense of wanderlust, traveling to different places throughout my life, but definitely not the number and places and diverse places that you guys have visited. I want to know how old I can be to join the Merchant Marine. I'm
There's
probably
no age limit.
Oh boy. Well, my wife and my daughter might have to do without me for 7 months while I go pull lines and paint. Sal, I want to give you a moment to talk about the book that you've written, the 2 books that you have coming up. But before we get to that, I want to ask you if there's something that you do want our audience to take away from the Merchant Marine, just if you had a top thing of this is what I really want them to know about a career in the Merchant Marines or the history of it, or just my personal take on it, what would that be from this podcast?
Well, I would tell you this. The reason the Merchant Marine is important, I always go back to World War II, and you're doing a show about veterans. So Merchant Mariners were in the front lines. I mean, literally, as the attack on Pearl Harbor happens, there's a ship right off the coast of Hawaii, the Cynthia Olsen, is attacked by a Japanese submarine, and the 31-person crew and two army soldiers on board die. They're lost at sea, and it's really the first ship lost by the U.S. Merchant Marine with the declaration of war. There've been some ships that have been attacked prior to that, but they were 733 ships lost in World War II. 9,500 mariners were killed. It was an excruciating toll. It was a toll on a civilian organization. They volunteered. They signed up. They went to their union halls. They got on a ship and they sailed into harm's way. And they were promised veteran status at the end of World War II because they basically sailed right alongside Navy and Marines and Army. And they got their veteran status in 1988. So 44 years later, it took to get that veteran status. Many of the Merchant Mariners already passed away. I think one of the things that is forgotten is the role that they play and the role they play. Bridget's sailing right now. She's, her ship can be thrust into the front lines immediately. It would be targeted because it has military cargo on board. At the end of World War II, I always have prop, so I bring a prop with me. At the end of World War II, the U.S. Army did an entire series, a 66-volume series on the U.S. Army in World War II. 66 volumes like this. I mean, they're tremendous. They're huge. The U.S. Merchant Marine got 81 pages. And that's their official history from World War II.
Wow.
And again, I think the Merchant Marine is a unique entity. It's unique because it has that national defense role. We really depend on it for our commerce and trade. We've gotten lax with it. We don't pay attention to it, and we've let it decline. You know, at the end of World War II, the U.S. Merchant Marine was #1 in the world. The U.S. Navy was #1 in the world. Today, the U.S. Navy is #1 in the world. The U.S. Merchant Marine is 21st. Whereas, you know, countries like China is #2 in both categories. Yeah. And so I think, you know, for me, you know, the Merchant Marine is vital for our commerce. It's vital for our commercial interests. It's important to have an American presence. It's great to see an American flag vessel sailing in and out of ports. It's great to have mariners like Bridget out there manning them. But I also think, you know, in time of a conflict, which again, I'd love to say we're never going to do it again, but you know, I'm a historian. I can tell you that's not the case. You know, sooner or later, you have an armed conflict. I think the Merchant Marine is important for that role.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just reiterating what Sal said. I mean, the Merchant Marine, it's a quiet industry, but it affects your lives every day, whether you know it or not. When it comes, and I mean, there's such a variety of stuff it does. I mean, it could be carrying your car, your iPhone, those new shoes you ordered off Amazon, food aid, military equipment. I mean, it's just such an essential lifeblood of global commerce, war, everything. It's just,
do you think
no one thinks about it because it's so in the background?
Do you think that it is, and maybe, I don't know if you've ever heard this, somebody say this to you, but do you think it's appropriate for someone to come up to a Merchant Marine and say, thank you for your service?
I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, we're definitely in harm's way, but not in the same way always as a veteran is. I mean, we do make similar sacrifices. You know, we're away from our families for months and weeks at a time. Yeah, I can't make heads or tails on that. I would appreciate it, but I don't know if I'd feel almost bad accepting it.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know, I have this discussion a lot about veteran status for merchant mariners, and again, I tend to focus on the veteran status when in times of conflict and war. You know, if you're doing it during the Persian Gulf War, if you're doing it during the initial part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, I think there should be something. You know, maybe you don't get a DD-214 from the military, but you know, you do get some sort of status for that, you know, and some sort of recognition for that. You know, it's funny. You know, I sailed on a hospital ship during the first Persian Gulf War. I met my wife on board it. Yeah. She was a Navy nurse. I was a merchant mariner. You know, at the end of that, she was entitled to the GI Bill, which paid for her to go to law school, and she had a lot of opportunities for that. You know, I didn't have that. I got a medal for being in the war, and I had to pay $35 to get it. And, you know, which was okay. I guess I'll send my money in and get my medal and you know, and it's like, okay. But this is the kind of thing. I don't know if it's good to say thank you for your service. I don't think most people will know what we did anyway, to tell you the truth. But I think it is important that they recognize how important it is to have one in time of war. And I think that's really the issue. Like Bridget says, merchant mariners are compensated. We get paid well. I just now making as much money as I did when I was a merchant mariner, you know, on shore. And it's one of the big perks for doing it. So it is different. It is a different thing, but I think it's very complimentary. I think, you know, one of the things that scares me the most is not how much the public doesn't know about what the Merchant Marine does. It's how much the military and government officials don't know about what the Merchant Marine does, because I think that's a dangerous thing. The Chief of Naval Operations in December had a talk in which he talked about how we really don't practice logistics, which is what the Merchant Marine is. It's all supply, it's all logistics. Yeah. And, you know, if you don't practice that, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's, I think, one of the big issues I have with it is they don't understand the role it plays.
Boy, this has been great. It really has opened my eyes to a lot of what this service is. And both your inputs here definitely have raised my awareness of what the Merchant Marines are, what they do, and that my level of respect has definitely increased, and hopefully our audience will as well. If our audience wants to find out more information about the Merchant Marines, study up on it, learn more about it, is there a place that they can go?
Well, I would recommend, a couple of things. Obviously, what's going on in the industry today is always a good snapshot. What are the big issues going on? So there's a lot of sites out there for that. gcaptain.com is one of the good ones. maritimeexecutive.com is a good one. Tradewinds. So there's a lot of news sites out there.
Yeah.
For the role of the merchant marine in history, I always recommend a site, www.usmm.org, which is the merchant marine at war site. Has some good stories in there, some good history in there to kind of go look at. There's a great book out there that I recommend. Alex Rowland's book is absolutely fantastic for that because it talks about the history of America at sea. It's just a great one. Goes from 1600 all the way up to the year 2000. Way of the Ship. I think that's a great history if you want to see, because it looks at not just the ocean side, but it looks at the inland water side. It looks at the steamboats in Pittsburgh and the importance of the Ohio and the Susquehanna all the way down to New Orleans, the Great Lakes. I think that's a good overall history side of it.
Fantastic. Those are great resources. And you wrote a book as well, Sal.
I did. I wrote a small little book for the U.S. Navy History and Heritage Command on the Merchant Marine in the Vietnam War. I basically took my master's thesis and put that into a book called The Fourth Arm of Defense, which talks about sea lift and logistics in the Vietnam War. And then I'm working on two new books. One is on military sea lift, the history of military sea lift from the Spanish-American War to the present day. And then one that specifically deals with the transportation of the American Expeditionary Force to Europe in World War I.
Wow. Well, we'll look for both of those. And I do want to end this episode like we did with our Major Mitch Fossum with a lightning round, as I assume that I have two experts, like I said here, that I have a list of. We're not going to go through all thousands of these terms, but I'm gonna throw some out here, and I'm going to throw out a term. You tell me what you think the definition is. This is the lightning round for our merchant marines on the Scuttlebutt here. First word, braze, B-R-A-Z-E.
Oh, I don't know. I lost already.
I don't know either. Braze, that's not what I'm familiar with.
To heat and join by means of hard solder. This may be brass, bronze, or other alloys.
Now, you need an engineer for that. We're not engineers. Bridget and I are dechies. So,
so I don't know if I'm going to pick out a weird term here. We're going to go with Butterworth.
On a tanker.
Yep. Butterworth is
tank cleaning?
Yep, tank cleaning system. Use it to get the oil off.
Okay. Correct. Butt strap.
Isn't that a type of weld?
This says a bar or plate used to fasten two or more objects together with their edges butted.
Almost. We were halfway there.
The chocks.
It's a fair lead for a line to go through. It allows the line to rub up against and not get chafed.
Yep. Looks like a block and tackle.
Correct. Compass is too easy. Compass, I can't do that one.
I don't know what that is.
The crown.
Oh God, I feel like I've heard it. Is it is it a part of rigging? A yard and stay system?
Term sometimes used denoting the roundup or camber of a deck. The crown of an anchor is located where the arms are welded to the shank.
Oh
wow.
I should have known the anchor. I thought there was something about it. I was thinking on the bow, but that's exactly where it is. Okay.
Two more. Deadlight.
Oh, the cover for a porthole?
That's right. See, Bridget, you just needed a warm up.
I'm a vacuum of useful knowledge.
And finally, we'll do flux. F-L-U-X.
Flux.
Seems like a lot of these are for engineers because a lot of them seem to be for welding. Substance such as borax, which I'm not quite sure what borax is, used in welding to help in the melting of the metal. Great. And one more for the bonus round. We will go with gunwale.
That's along the side of the main deck there. It's prevents you from kind of go overboard, kind of a railing system or something like that.
Yeah. And thank you both for coming on for our Merchant Marine episode. I know with the BBC, we have weekly programs, Mondays, Monday nights, Wednesday mornings, Thursday evenings, all on Zoom live. We would love to do a Merchant Marine episode for that as well. Would love to have you both join us. I'll talk with our Executive Director, Todd DiPestino, to set that up, and our audience, hopefully you'd come over and join us for that as well. It's always a good time. I'll leave you both with one word you would like to describe the Merchant Marines.
I'm going to go with the word unsung. So that's my word for the day. It's just, it's little known and not appreciated.
Unsung. Bridget?
Yeah, I was thinking the same, unsung.
Well, hopefully we were able to
life every day.
Hopefully we're able to sing your praises a bit on this and be able to draw some more attention to the Merchant Marines. Thank you for all the resources. Thank you for your time today. And you as our audience, please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube for the Scuttlebutt to get more information about the Merchant Marines. You can check out all of that in our information. We'll have everything listed that we talked about here today. We thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon on the Scuttlebutt.